All right. We have a great guest on. We're talking with Mr. Zach Barnett. We're going to talk. He's from footballscoop.com. If you don't know footballscoop.com, if you want to know everything that's going on in football, especially with respect to college, a little bit of pro and even some high school, and especially the bigger programs, they cover everything, especially coaching changes, important updates with respect to rules that are changing in football, and even stuff with respect to the portal. So this is the guy, and we're excited to have him on. Thanks for being a part of the podcast.
Hey, thank y'all for having me.
First of all, talk a little bit about, before we dive into everything, talk about kind of what your role is with Football Scoop and the things that you have to take on and handle.
Yeah, so one of the most common questions I get asked is how big is our staff? And it's four of us. There's Scott, our president, who lives in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Doug Samuels is our content manager. He's a high school coach in the Grand Rapids area of Michigan. We have John Bryce, who lives in South Bend, and then myself, who I live outside Fort Worth, Texas. Doug, John, and I write most of pretty much all of the content for the website. Doug does a great job managing the scoop page, and then John handles most of the heavy lifting when it comes to news. But it's very much a team effort. When news happens, we work together as a team to figure out what's going on there. I handle most of what I do is the front page content. That's following news, following trends, stuff like that. I kind of take more of a global picture of what's going on in the game. Football, the good thing about writing for a website is you never run out of space. So we're always looking for content. So I have a wide range to pursue. Really whatever I want to write about in regards to the game of football. Some of that stuff that I write about doesn't do so well. Some of it takes off and does really well. And that's the game when you're writing for online, because we have a core audience of football coaches.
Of course.
What sets Football Scoop apart is our mission is primarily to help coaches move about and grow in their professions or whatever that may be. But at the same time, when you write on the internet, anyone in the world can come across it.
Absolutely.
So trying to balance those two things is the joy and the challenge of this job.
And I think it's incredible, right? Because there's no website out there like it, right? And for, coaches, right, which is pretty much, a cult following type of group, right? And so to have those guys religiously, have a site that is dedicated just to pretty much, whether it be the educational or the job advancement of it. I've followed Football Scoop for as long as I've been a high school coach, since that was a site that I don't even know how I came about finding it. But I would constantly, I would check that thing like 10 times a day, refresh it, because there's constantly new articles coming out, whether it be the scoop and following what's going on in the headlines, or whether it be the job boards, or, just the movement of the intricacies of coaching on that level. I always just found fascinating. And, then to hear, right, and, I kind of knew because I did a little bit of research, but to hear that the entire site is mainly just four of you guys that handle it, to me, is just incredible.
Yeah, thank you. One of my favorite things to do every year, at the AFCA convention every year, they do a graduate assistant career forum where they'll have some big guys in the profession sit up and talk for 2 hours about how to move about in the profession for GAs. And it's always Monday, 8 a.m., just to try to see who really wants to be there. And the room's always full. And most of it is just about, how do I move from where I am to get a real job? And inevitably, it's different guys up at the front every single year, but inevitably one of them will say, don't just sit on Football Scoop and refresh it all day long. And I'm just sitting there, it's like, yes, please do that.
Yeah. But I mean, look,
Of
like
course.
in reality, like, look, you come into this profession as a young guy, right? And everybody, oh, I'd love to be a college coach, or I'd love to get to the NFL. Well, how the hell do you do that, right? Where, if you didn't play at a high level and kind of just stay in it and go from becoming a player to a GA within a program itself, well, how do I advance myself? Or how do I, I've come back to my hometown and I'm coaching the high school here, but I'd like to get to the next level, right? And, Football Scoops allows you to do that. I mean, I remember as a young guy, I'm applying to jobs on the, we're New Jersey, we're two new guys from New Jersey, but, I'm applying to jobs in like South Dakota, and I'm applying to jobs in Seattle, right? Or I would have never known about those had it not come from, Football Scoop or whatnot. It's an incredible avenue for guys like us who are, all football guys, all in all the time. It's kind of a mix of like a job board and TMZ. I like to look at it like that, right? Because, you see the movement of coaches within it, and it's kind of interesting in that, so there adds that a little extra to it. But it's just, there's nothing out there like it.
Yeah, and that's kind of boils back to the origin story. So Football Scoop was started in 1999 by a GA at the time at TCU named Keith Allen, and he was just kind of like, well, he was doing what every coach did at the time, calling around to every program he could find a phone number for,
Right.
asking if they had jobs. And it was just like, well, if I'm doing that, everyone else in my position is doing that, so why don't I create a website? So now the site's in its 25th year, which is in internet terms is like 250 years. So that
hell yeah.
that proves its need, its value to the community. And I'm glad to play a small part in that.
What are some of the trends that you're seeing in coaching jobs? Are there like things over the last few years that you've seen as far as trend wise, number of jobs that are open, types of jobs that are coming about, those kind of things?
Yeah, I would say the off-field stuff, since I started, has just exploded. It's kind of funny because we're in the growing pains of moving into a new era to where coaching has always been a big job, but actual coaching has become such a big job that it's about to become a smaller job. And with the portal and recruiting and NIL and all that stuff, it's simply become too much to handle for one person. So here 5 years from now, we're going to have personnel staffs that are equally as big and bigger than coaching staffs, and before too long, coaches will just be there. It'll be much more like the NFL, where your job is primarily just to coach. And
yep.
the talent acquisition will be handled by a different set of hands. And then the other trend I'm seeing that is just top of mind primarily because it's just happened. We saw Deshaun Jackson get a job. We've seen Michael Vick get a job, and we've seen a lot of these FCS schools try to go to the Dion model of, well, let's hire a former player to be our head coach because it worked out for Dion. And certainly Dion, he went about it a little bit the hard way. He skipped from, he was a high school offensive coordinator at a private school here in the Dallas area, and then jumped to an FCS head coach. And no one else in the world would ever do that if they weren't Deion Sanders. But he still went about it a little bit the hard way. I mean, he started at the youth level. He'd been coaching for a long time. He didn't just jump into a head.
No, I believe he created a youth team, right? Didn't he make his own team, and then ultimately, didn't he build his own? Wasn't it his own high school that he created, basically?
Yeah, and that ultimately went up in flames, and was along why I viewed him skeptically, and that hasn't worked. He's far outstripped my expectations, but he grinded to much more than you'd ever see a player of his stature grind. And Deshaun Jackson, Michael Vick have not grinded in the same way that he did. But at the same time, college coaching has become much more of the head coaching position has been so much more about people management and relationships, and not so much as much nearly about simple ball knowledge and proving that you can be a position coach, then a coordinator, then a head coach. It's much more about getting the right people in the boat and keeping the right people in the boat than anything else.
That's interesting. It's so crazy to me that, and I think your point about Dion was really valid. Like, people don't realize that they think he just appeared as the Jackson State coach. They don't realize that obviously he's been with his sons. That's how he's been doing it. But he's been coaching all those years, albeit at the lower levels, but he was coaching. So, and if he wasn't Dion, he still wouldn't have gotten the Jackson State job. But it's funny that it all of a sudden like flips around. Programs that are in desperation are turning towards a celebrity coach to try and save their program. And I feel like it's kind of
right, because Delaware State was almost on the chopping block a couple years ago, I believe. So as a Division II.
Disaster. To me, it's a recipe for disaster, and this is why I say that. Not that they can't succeed, okay, but Dion had a background at least as a coach, right? So he understands like when mom and dad get mad about what he's doing, what his solution is to that problem, quote unquote. Right? Or a player is not happy about playing time or isn't happy about this, what we could do. He also could set up his own style of principles that he has, right? Like you see the videos that he puts out there. He kind of has a certain approach. He's kind of new school and old school at the same time, right? Well, you get a coach that hasn't coached before at all. You don't even know, like they have to come up out of either from their own experience as a player, what they learned from other coaches, and they've got to come out of thin air with no experience, a philosophy.
Like a Michael Vick.
Right. So they're basically testing it on other human beings. They're testing their philosophy on other human beings without ever having doing any of this before, which I find really
on the what do they call that? On the job training?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, I think that's definitely. I don't know. Yeah. On the job training. I don't even know. There is no training. It's just you're on the job. So
figure like, hey, sink or swim, buddy. Like, figure this out.
I wonder if you'll continue to see. So it's. I guess they're kind of looking at some of these places. Are looking at it as just like this person is like a CEO without CEO's experience, but a CEO
hire the right people
and just put a celebrity and kids will come there. And you will have kids that will come there. But then the question is, I always say this, what happens when you lose? The thing that Dion did a good job of, in my opinion.
They won enough.
Oh, no. Well, when he was losing that first year, he still handled kind of his approach and his plan to what he was trying to do. He kind of knew where he wanted to go. And I wonder when those guys lose, what is the plan? Like Ed Reed, they tried Ed Reed last year, who's obviously one of the greatest football players of all time also. And Ed Reed was very frustrated because he didn't have things that he wanted and didn't like it. And he hadn't even really started the job and basically was kind of booted. And that was at Bethune-Cookman. So which is an HBCU, which I think both these guys are Vic and Deshaun Jackson are going to. Why do you think that they want to hire celebrities? Am I right? Do you think it's desperation for the program, or do you think it'll bring they think it's just going to bring enough awareness and recruits?
I think it's a risk reward proposition. And I've been in this business like 12 years, so I'm certainly not trying to position myself as an expert on HBCU football and FCS football and stuff like that. But I know enough to know it's not the best time to fund programs at that level. And again, I don't have the wealth of knowledge to say, well, it's not like it was in the 90s and the 80s or whatnot when the glory years of HBCU football. For all I know, it's kind of always been tying things together by your shoestrings. But if you're struggling to win, you're struggling to fund your program, if you can get a Michael Vick or a Deshaun Jackson, in a lot of ways it can be a shortcut to get you into living rooms that you wouldn't otherwise be in, be it for players, be it for donations, for NIL, that type of thing. And if it doesn't work, well, your program hasn't been winning. So 2-3 years from now, more or less, you're probably in the same position you are right now. I think that's the calculation these programs are making.
That makes sense. There really is no risk because they're already up Schitt's Creek to a certain extent, and now maybe this can get them out of that. And I think the bigger issue is obviously for HBCUs, but for a lot of FCS programs in general, is that because college football at the highest level has become professional football, and you have to pay players. The HBCUs know that, much similar to a lot of the other FCS programs, they're not going to have funds to pay players. So if they can bring a big name in, maybe they can attract some better players that fall through the cracks, that maybe don't get the Division I offers, though they have hoped, that maybe they get a better player comes to them versus going to, I don't know, New Hampshire or something like that. Maybe they get that player where they haven't really gotten that player before, type of thing.
Right. And to your point, that's obviously the Dion model at Jackson State, except Dion learned what worked and didn't work in the shadows, in the youth level of Dallas when no one was watching. And he made his mistakes in the dark. And by the time he got to Jackson State, at least from the people management aspect, he was experienced in that regard. And so Michael Vick, Deshaun Jackson, those guys are going to be figuring out, what works and what doesn't work for them in the big leagues of Division I football, and they're going to be having to do that on the fly. That's my worry. And if it goes wrong for those guys, I think that's going to be where it goes wrong.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. What are some of the other things that you're seeing? In general, I see that head coaches are younger and younger, right? Is that continuing to be a ongoing trend that you see coming forward?
Yeah, I think the college football has changed so much in the last 4 years, and I hesitate to say better or worse, but different is I think the word to use, because excuse me, just this past year, I won't use names, but there was a group Power 4 head coach who looked at his program and said, the guys that should be studs on this team are this guy's on this top 25 team, this guy's on this top 25 team, this guy's on this top 25 team. We have no money. I'm gonna step away for a couple years and then get back into the game at a program that has more money and where I don't have a couple 2-10 seasons on my resume. So he got out, and then his job came open, and there were a bunch of guys that hopped on that job. And the one who got it was a G5 head coach who his program was going through a lot of the same things as his current program, but it was just in a different place. And he was earning a smaller tax bracket. So I think it's I hesitate to say younger, because the biggest hire of this cycle is as far as we know, the oldest hire ever made in college football, and Bill Belichick.
Right.
So I hesitate to say younger, but a different is where it's going.
And do you think with and you mentioned Bill Belichick, so I'm sure that I think that this is an interesting possible trend too, besides the celebrity coaches that are ex-NFL players becoming head coaches. The greatest NFL head coach of all time, arguably, with the one with the most championships, has come down to college because the model has come more to the NFL. Are you hearing that there may be other guys in that same boat? And by the way, Pete Carroll was really the first to kind of do it long before there was actual money in college football. He was really kind of the first guy to do it, and successfully. But Bill Belichick, with the structure of the NFL, bringing that to college, is that something that is kind of getting more inquired about?
I think there's going to be a lot of people watching that because Dion has succeeded at Colorado despite not recruiting off campus. And for a long, long time, up until Dion did it, that would have been unthinkable. You had to be out on the road as much as your competition, seeing players in the spring, going in home in the winter, and Dion doesn't do any of that. And Colorado so far hasn't suffered for that, largely because he's able to build – he cherry picks in recruiting, and when he goes in all in on a recruit, he tends to get that guy. But for the most part, he builds his team through the portal, and portal recruiting is so different than high school recruiting. So Deion's been able to do it. If Bill Belichick's able to, I certainly don't expect Bill Belichick to be pounding the pavement for recruits. It's going to be a very different model.
I think more or less it'll be his son probably pounding the pavement, right? Or his assistants that'll kind of be doing
and
that.
his younger coaches.
He has a definite interesting buyout clause in his, I think it's June 1st. It's only a $1 million buyout clause or something of that nature.
Right. And so that's the ultimate question is how committed is he really?
Right.
He'll be there for 2025, and then after that, it's anybody's guess. And so the question is he at North Carolina because he truly wants to be there, or is he at North Carolina because they're the only program that would hire him? That's the question. Right. He got basically no sniffs in the NFL this past cycle. The 2024-2025 cycle, he's either sidelined or sitting out on purpose, depending on who you believe. And then the 2026 cycle remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting from that standpoint. You're right. Everyone's watching that. And if he does succeed, that's the other thing that's interesting. It's like players are in the portal. Coaches are essentially in the portal. Like, like they're looking, hey, can I win here for several years and move on to the next gig? Because now they know that there's, before they pretended they were going to stay there at least forever. But now they don't even have to pretend because their players aren't pretending to stay there forever. So it's like, I'm going to go here and succeed, and then I'll figure it out after a couple of years what my status is going forward. And if I'm doing well, I'll stay or go. And if I'm not doing well, they'll just get rid of me anyway. So it's kind of
it's definitely interesting times, Zach. And I mean, you're on the front lines of it. You see it, from, your FCS level, your FBS level, even now you're seeing, the movement of, NAIA coaches moving up in the world or D3 coaches, moving up in the world. You just see, I believe the head coach at Cortland State, who just won a national championship for the Division III level last year, I believe. And I think you're just seeing a lot of different types of those types of trends where now movement is happening so much. It's more prevalent, I want to say now. I don't know if it has something to do with, kind of the time squeeze that head coaches and coaches in general are put under now. It used to be, hey, you got, 4 to 5 years. Now it's more, I want to say, like, if they're not change within 2 to 3 years, guys are gone. They're out the door. We're willing to just, buy it out and kind of go from there. I mean, there's a lot of really good college head coaches getting paid a lot of money to sit home, right? Your Jimbo Fishers of the world, your Ed, kind of not coaching for a couple years until they kind of figure it out. And then you have some guys, that literally jump right back into it, the very next year. So I think you're seeing a lot of those trends across college football now. Like Coach said, the transfer portal is alive and well with the players, but it's also alive and well with coaches.
Yeah, and ultimately that's why I think we have the transfer portal is the system that we had in place under the NCAA's rules lasted way, way, way too long, and eventually the public got fed up with it, went to the courts were fed up with it, and that's where we are now, to where the NCAA by court order literally can't even enforce its rules. I think if in 2012 or so, if the NCAA had come up with a rule that said you can transfer and play as an undergraduate one time and play immediately, and then transfer again as a graduate once you have your degree, I don't think you would have seen the portal to be where it is today, because ultimately I don't think the court cases that forced the NCAA's hand would have ever been brought. Because I think that would have been like, all right, this is a fair system. That would have been the quote unquote guardrails that everyone's looking for. But the public got fed up with coaches leaving year after year after year, and these guys are the professionals. The unpaid amateurs are more tied to their programs than the professionals. that didn't sit well with people, and so that's where we are now. And so eventually, the NCAA is now begging for Congress to create a system that the NCAA waited decades and decades and decades to do. And one thing I want to be clear with your listeners is what I think when a lot of people say the NCAA, they view it as these snobs in the ivory towers in Indianapolis creating these rules that the rest of the schools have to live by, and that's not the case. The schools are the NCAA. The inmates run the asylum in college sports. So it was the schools that wrote the rules, the schools that kept the rule book well in place long after it outlived its usefulness, and so that's why we are now. The schools created their own problems here.
I think that's a huge part of it. The schools created the issue. And now it's funny that they're expecting Congress to clean up their mess. I think it's wild, but it's hard.
Can you guys bail us out? You know what I mean? Like, hey, can you help us out?
Well, I mean, that's really that's their only choice now, because you have a situation to where each state is incentivized to write its laws that best benefit them. I mean, if you're in Arkansas, if you're the Attorney General in Arkansas, and you want to be reelected, one way to do that is to create some rules or sue the NCAA to create a law that helps the Razorbacks get players easier than the Tigers and the Longhorns and the Aggies. So it's kind of a lowest common denominator situation where the NCAA is beholden to kind of the dumbest state out there. And so now you have to have a national law, and so you're at the mercy of Congress, and I'm far from an expert on what's happening there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. What now do you do with your board? Do you do anything with respect to transfer portal or anything like that with the players, or you guys are strictly on the coaches' end of everything?
I am so glad that we don't cover the transfer portal.
Zach, I think you'd need a couple more interns or something. I mean, with the movement, I mean, shit. We're talking 7,000 players in the transfer portal right now. The movement on a daily basis about, who's committing here or who's going here and who's doing that, just to track all of that. And then obviously, like, to get access to the actual portal itself to see who's even in it, right? Dave, we talked about that, right? Like, only certain people even have access to see who's really in it.
Yeah, and the portal itself is just basically a souped-up Google Doc where you can see literally guys' names get entered, and I don't have access to that and don't want access to that because I mean, the numbers that people throw out there are staggering, and I follow the guys that keep up with that, and they're doing the Lord's work. And I'm so glad that we don't have to do that. But the reality of it is the 2025 college football playoff is being shaped right now by who goes where. I mean, we saw that with Indiana, who at this time last year even dreamed that Indiana would be a contender, that Arizona State would be a real contender. But the programs jobs are being won and lost next fall by what's happening right now, and so you have to keep up with it. But I'm so glad that it's not me.
No doubt about it. What do you see like going forward as far as now? And I'm curious too because you guys do a high school football scoop.
That's
too,
phenomenal
right?
too.
What are some of the things that you see going forward with respect to like the high school side of it, and are you seeing any kind of trends there?
I think high school is so. I'm just thinking too. It's so different from state to state that it's kind of hard to say. This is happening in high school football because it's so. I mean, I'm looking to, Doug does a great job as a high school coach, a high school head coach, and also works full-time for us. And then I'm looking down here in Texas to where I'm thinking too, I heard a talk from Gus Malzahn at the AFCA convention a few years ago, when he was a high school coach, and he was a high school coach in Arkansas and tried to get a job in Texas, and said that it's easier to become an SEC head coach than it is to become a Texas high school coach if you're not in the state of Texas. And he was joking, but at the same time being serious. So it's so different from state to state that it's really hard to say that this one thing is happening in high school football.
Yeah, and look, and we talk to high school coaches throughout the country, right? We've had guys on from Florida, guys from Oklahoma, guys from Washington State, right? And like you said, it's so vastly different from state to state. And Dave has been been dealing with high school kids, with his national showcases and combines and things of that nature, that he kind of really has a pretty good grasp of, high school football on a national, level. And here we are, we're based in New Jersey, which is very different than a lot of other states when it comes to high school football. But like you said, Zach, just in our conversations with high school football coaches, just from certain, from state to state, it is so vastly different in every retrospect, right? In every aspect of it, right? From the amount of time that you get to spend with your players to, some states have spring ball, other states don't, right? Like just that stuff in general, to keep up with it or to even track all of it, you would almost need like a guy individually like that would be an expert in their own state and how they go about high school football to just navigate the whole thing.
Yeah, I will say one thing. One answer that did come to mind is that every coach from Texas to New Jersey to Washington State is dealing with, and that is, it's never been more difficult to help your guys live their dreams of playing college ball, and that's because of the portal and then the ruling that we saw this month with Diego Pavia, the Vanderbilt quarterback, former JUCO guy who got a court to rule that he gets an extra year because he played a year. He actually played 2 years in JUCO, and I hate that ruling so much. Like I understand that the NCAA created precedent, and prep school years didn't count, but JUCO years did count, and all that stuff. I get why the courts ruled it the way they did. I still hate it, and I think it's a bad thing. Diego Pavia, I at one point literally thought about creating a Diego Pavia award for just the ultimate badass in college football. And I understand why he's doing it, because he's going to make $1 million playing college football next year. And raise your hand if you've ever turned down $1 million to play college football, given the opportunity. So it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but at the same time, you had your opportunity because at some point
you turn down $10 to play college football.
But Diego Pavia, every other kid that's ever played college football had their opportunity because someone in front of them moved on and their eligibility expired. And so that's the nature of college football is supposed to be a temporary thing. And so now guys are trying to turn into a career. And I hate that so much because it takes away opportunities from other players. And so if you're an 18-year-old kid, I would say college scholarship numbers not changing, but it is changing. It's going to up to 105, but there's still a finite amount of spots, and you have to compete against transfer portal kids, and now you potentially have to compete against JUCO. A 20-year-old who's played 2 years of JUCO football could potentially be a true freshman, just like you are at 17 or 18, and it's really tough to compete for that. And so it's never been harder for high school coaches to get their counterparts in the college game to give these guys offers. And so navigating that is something that every high school coach is going to have to deal with. And they're doing the Lord's work, because you should be able to go from high school to college and play at your level. But now it's become minor league baseball in a way, to where you're going to have to go from single A ball to double A ball to triple A and then to the big leagues. And the big leagues being FBS, Division I, the Power Four. However you want to describe it, but it's becoming where if you're a high school coach sitting down with mom and dad, you're probably going to have to say more often than not, your son's going to have to play for 3 different colleges to get to where he ultimately wants to be. And that's not a situation where it's daunting for anyone. And my heart goes out to every high school coach that's having to deal with that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that is, I think that ruling was a terrible ruling. And if it sticks, you're going to have high school recruiting be so severely affected, and so people. I mean, they're just not going to bother recruiting high school in general. There's not going to be availability at the highest level, other than 4 and 5 stars. The 4 and 5 stars are always going to go somewhere. But if literally the 3 stars, guys that used to have 10 offers in the past, they may be going FCS. Everything gets pushed down, and I think in the long run, I always say, like, football is one of those sports that mom has to subscribe to, you know what I mean? Not just dad. Mom's got to say, yes, you can go play it. And if there's no direct path to an opportunity in college as it was before, which was the greatest thing about it, you will have that pool, start to dwindle. And basically, I wonder if in the long run, the only pool you'll have is really the elite athlete. And outside of the elite athlete, will some of these college football programs, at the lower levels start to go away because they won't have enough people that playing the sport that will be able to go and play, want to go play in college, right? Because the kind of dream of playing at a higher level starts to go away. And if they choose baseball, that same athlete chooses baseball or basketball or I don't know, but lacrosse, right? Then you start to have a problem. That's my biggest thought process with the Pavia rule, more than anything.
Yeah, and the other thing that I worry about, and I hate to be soapbox guy, but at the same time, I'm thinking about TJ Finley, quarterback who's kind of become a professional college quarterback. He's been at Auburn, LSU, Texas State, Western Kentucky, and then now he's in the portal and going to transfer somewhere else. And I'm sure he'll get offers because the supply and demand is in favor of guys who've proven they can start at the Division I level. But
yep.
I mean, you go to 5 schools in 6 years because you're not good enough to play professional football. And so if you're not good enough to play professional football, you're going to have to get a real job. And how is that kid going to be able to do that? I mean, I would love to see his transcript, but what does this kid's transcript look like? And you think, well, maybe he's going to get into coaching. Well, the first word in GA is graduate. You have to graduate from college, and I genuinely hope he's able to graduate, but I genuinely don't see how you could do that when you attended 5 different colleges.
Right. That's exactly right. It's a great point.
And then it just doesn't water down everything, right? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. There's just so much more to the game of football in my eyes that teaches so much more off the field stuff than it does on the field in terms of, grit and fighting through some adversity and all of those kind of things. But if you're transferring every year just to better your situation because it's maybe an easier path or, there's some other initiative that, gets you to go and do that. Like, what are we really teaching here? And what are we really, it's hard because I don't blame the coaches for taking those guys that are in the portal or those guys that have moved on and whatever, because they've proven that and they're being pushed to win sooner, right? So to take that high school guy and bring him along and develop him and do all that, kind of put all that time and all that work into it, so that once he becomes an All-American as a junior, he leaves. I mean, it's so productive or counterintuitive to kind of do it that way. It's like, what are we really getting at in the long run?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I don't want to be soapbox guy, but I think it's just kind of it's opposition of incentives. I think coaches are coaching to win and to keep their jobs. And so as a coach, you can sit here and say, the portal allows these guys to take the easy way out. And what happened to fighting through adversity? What happened to waiting your turn? But then at the same time, I see, I'm thinking specifically the quarterback position, where Florida State's going to be on with their 4th straight transfer quarterback, and it's like you can send that message, but at the same time, are you recruiting over your own players by bringing in a portal guy year after year after year? And what message does that send to the guys that committed to you out of high school that have maybe waited their turn and said, all right, I'm next up. Wait, you bring in this portal guy. Well, I've waited my turn. I've committed to you out of high school, and now you're bringing in this guy to
I've
play
done
over
everything
me.
you've asked, right? Like
Yeah,
I've been at
I'm
every
getting out
5
of here.
a.m. workout. I've done all of that stuff, right? Like, and now, coach, all of a sudden, like, you got a new shiny penny that you want to bring in here. Now, like, what are we doing? What are you trying to?
Yeah,
to show
and
me?
so I hesitate again. I hesitate to say better or worse. I just think different is the word, because how many guys have gotten to star and shine at the biggest level because of the new opportunities they have? And I mean, it's the American dream to go bet on yourself and take a risk and chase your fortune. And a guy like Diego Pavia, who, I mean, beat Alabama in what in my mind is the best game of the year. And would college football be better served if he was quote unquote stuck at New Mexico State? New Mexico State would have been a lot better off, but his coaches would have been gone, and he would have still had to be there. So in some ways better, some ways worse. You get one shot to be a college football player, and if you want to do that, you got to get on the field. If you have to leave because you've been recruited over, it's hard to fault a guy for that. But at the same time, I think a lot of these guys would be better served sitting and waiting. So I think we're recording this here in late December, where the portal and the playoff are going on at the same time in a situation that makes no sense. And I think we're at a point now where the college leaders need to get rid of the. I think one of the things that we can do to make this is to eliminate spring football as we know it, and kind of move that to summer, and that way we can eliminate the need for a winter transfer window, because you don't have to be in school for practice that starts in March. Practice doesn't start till May.
Right, because everybody's rushing to get on campus.
Yeah, so stay where you are through the spring semester. Maybe cooler heads will prevail, and you're better off staying where you are in the first place and not transferring. But there's not such a rush to transfer and leave immediately.
That's interesting.
Right,
so getting rid of essentially spring ball and moving it after the semester. So is that what you're saying? Like,
would now give them time, right? You're saying to make that decision where, look, you look at a situation like the Penn State quarterback, the backup, right, where he was forced to leave, right, a college football team during their college football run because those other portal quarterbacks were now being scooped up. His opportunities would lessen the longer he stayed with his team, right? Is that kind of what you're saying, Zach, to kind of just push everything a little bit of a window?
Yeah, and he's transferring because Drew Aller is staying at Penn State, which I think not a lot of people expected to happen, but that's happening. And ultimately, who can be upset that a quarterback is staying in college? Good for him, good for Penn State, good for the game, bad for Bo Prabula. So if he wants to play somewhere, he's got to get in and get a spot now. You can't show up and be a QB1 and show up on your new school in June. So if we were to push everything back, I mean, you could even open the portal February 1st and allow guys to go out and see what the market is and all that stuff. But if you start practice, let's just say, May 20th, and then that way he can get through his spring semester, figure out where he stands, see what offers are up there, and then transfer to his new school and show up and be ready to go. And you'd have just kind of an extended preseason where practice May and June, take a few weeks off, start back up in July. I'm not by any means saying that this is perfect. I just think it's the lesser of two evils.
Right. And I think that's a trend too, right? Like you see a lot of high school guys trying to graduate early or trying to get there. Everybody's rushing to get in for the spring semester to perform and have spring ball kind of under their belt, right? Because now guys start counting semesters, not years, in terms of like, hey, if I get in early, I can learn the playbook, I can get on the field, I get 15 or 16 practices, whatever it is, and then I can kind of get myself aligned for the fall. And I think that's a trend that you've seen a lot of guys start to do now, high school wise. And then again, going back to the high school football from state to state, some schools and states allow that to happen. Some schools kind of push back against that, right? And what we've seen, schools in the South allow that to happen more. So that's more of a track, right? Up here in the Northeast, there's schools that do it, but they kind of got to jump through a couple hoops to be able to do that and get on campus and things of that nature.
Yeah, and that's one thing we're seeing in Texas. There's a bill currently in the state house to allow kids to transfer one time in their high school career for athletic purposes.
Oh, well,
I'm just like,
I'd love to hear what it is in Jersey. In Jersey, you're allowed to transfer as many times as you want.
Oh, no, I hope that doesn't come to Texas, but I know in Arizona, it's you can pretty much enroll wherever you want. They have all open enrollment as well. So different states do differently.
Florida's like that as well. Yeah. So Jersey, you can transfer everything like as many times. You get one free transfer rule. If you did it now junior year going into senior year, you now have to sit 22 days in order to play senior year. But it's definitely created Wild West in New Jersey. That's for sure.
Man, well, here in Texas, you have some districts that have open enrollment. They'll take everyone. Some that don't. Some that, everyone knows recruits. Some that don't. So I again don't want to be soapbox guy and cry for the purity of a game that's not pure, but at the same time, allowing kids and encouraging kids to transfer purely for athletic purposes just seems like it's sending the wrong message.
Yeah, well, I think that ship is essentially sailed.
Yeah,
unfortunately, the wrong message is being sent on a repeated basis, and it trickles all the way down.
In Jersey, it really kind of started with basketball, right? Like basketball was the big move of how guys would move from school to school to school. And it's just kind of, you're seeing what I think in high school sports in general is you're obviously, a lot of guys just look at what's happening in college football and a lot of, whether it be or parents think that that's just kind of how high school works, right? So, I go to this high school, I can just jump in a portal and go to wherever. And it's like, that's not really how it works. You kind of got to literally sit down and talk to and educate yourself on how each state works with it. And then the coaches themselves too, they need to educate themselves on kind of how the whole thing works, because a lot of them are misinformed or, still going off of what used to be. And you're seeing that in college football as well, right? I mean, you saw some college coaches that were really firm and really took a stand on, we're going to do it this way. And we're not going to take transfer guys. And we're going to, kind of continue to run its course and do it this way. And some of those guys have kind of changed their viewpoint now, seeing how rampant this thing really has gone.
A lot of college coaches need to educate themselves on the rules of the game as well. We saw that Pittsburgh-Toledo game yesterday where it seemed like neither coach knew the rules of overtime as overtime was happening.
That's crazy too. Isn't that crazy?
To me, that's
insane to me.
Yeah.
I saw that. I've completely.
It's like, man, somebody on staff has to have a clue as to how this freaking thing works, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are we doing?
Oh man, well, it's been great having you on and talking this stuff. We could probably talk this all day because there's so many things that are going on. I'll give you this: at least college football, because of all the wildness, gives you a place to go work every single day, right? So
yeah,
Zach, remember you said, buddy, you never run out of room. You said you never run out of room with things to write, man. So I'm sure. You're always going to be set with all this shit.
Yeah. A lot of people, the most common question I get from civilians is, what do you write about in the off season? And I'm just like, what off season?
You're like, are you kidding me? You're like, this is where I really make my money.
Yeah.
Well, Zach, it's been great having you on. We'd love to have you back on again, maybe in the spring. Yeah, we'll talk to you real soon. It's been great having you on, man. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me. Enjoyed the conversation.
Zach, really appreciate it.